I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Capella University is rethinking higher education. With its game-changing FlexPath learning format, you can earn your degree on your schedule and fit your education seamlessly into your life. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
Hey, a year ago I was invited to interview Freeway Rick Ross, the largest crack dealer in history, at a conference run by Jason Gaignard, who runs the Mastermind Talks conference. About several hundred entrepreneurs show up and listen. This year, Jason had a surprise guest he wanted me to interview, Tony Hawk, who was the world champion of skateboarding for 12 years in a row and has sold about $1 billion worth of video games on skateboarding. I had no idea what I was going to ask Tony. I knew nothing about skateboarding, but what fascinated me was how you can take any interest, and Tony was, of course, interested in riding his skateboard, and basically create a business empire out of it. And I wanted to find out how Tony did it, how he became excellent at skateboarding, how he became excellent at business, and that's where this interview went. By the way, keep listening all the way to the end. You'll hear a bonus part where we open questions up to the audience.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
The way I turned pro was I had reached the top of the amateur ranks, and I'm filling out the entry form to the next event, and there's a checkbox that says amateur and there's a checkbox that says pro, and so I checked the pro box. And then that was it.
And so when did you decide, okay, I'm going to dominate every area of it? And
that was never
that wasn't your world.
That was not a conscious decision, no.
You just come out of the bushes, typical Altucher fashion. Just like last year, we had James interview Rick Ross, the real Rick Ross. For those of you who were not here last year, the real Rick Ross was the second largest drug kingpin in U.S. history. I think when he was arrested, he was worth $600 million. And sweetheart of a guy. He really is. He's a super nice guy. But this year we have Tony, a little more milder. You're not into that stuff. We don't know yet. There you go. And I've always been a huge fan of Tony. I mean, just given I'm 31 now, I grew up with the Tony Hawk franchise of games. And there's a lot of people in the sports space, obviously, who do well in sports, and then unfortunately they fall off the map and don't have a business plan in place or anything like that. And Tony obviously is one of those athletes that has done a really good job, crossing the chasm into entrepreneurship with licensing and that kind of stuff. And again, super likable guy. So I'm not going to hold it up any longer. James Altucher and Tony Hawk.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So I have to admit, I have to ask totally stupid, naive questions first. Are you okay with that? Like the most stupid questions.
I would prefer that.
Okay, good.
So I could barely like walk 3 steps without falling over. So I have to ask just some of the physics of what you do. So I was watching some videos earlier, and when you're like kind of vroom and sort of
That's what we call it.
sort of upside down and about to do like 2.5 twists, how is it that 10 seconds later you're not dead?
It's from a lot of trying and failing. It really is. I mean, and also you just start to get a sixth sense of where you are in the air and where you need to be and how to land and how to adjust yourself. And it just comes with experience, though. I mean, to learn tricks like in the air, doing flips and things, you have to be, not that you want to, but you have to be willing to take some knocks along the way.
So what was the first, so you've been doing this since you were like 10 or 11, depending on when you consider when you got serious. What was the first time there was a trick you did that originally you thought, there's no way I'm going to do that without killing myself?
I think it was the first time I ever got airborne out of a pool, because when I started skating, it was all backyard pools. I got into skating right at the end of the Dogtown Z-Boys days. So the whole idea of vertical ramps, that came later because those were just trying to emulate pools. And so I'm skating these pools, and I remember the first time I went to a skate park, and I saw these what I thought were grown men. They were, like
12.
18, 17, 18, flying out of these swimming pools. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And I never thought it might be a reality. I just wanted to work towards it. And I remember the day that I actually felt my wheels hit the coping and that I was above it. And I remember thinking, you better hold on, because if you really fall off of this, you don't know how to fall.
So what happened?
Well, I held on. I made it. I had to make it. I had no choice. I didn't really, even falling is something you learn how to do. I was not that well versed in falling at that time in terms of getting out of something safely. I fell a lot, but I didn't really know how to get out of it safely.
So what does that mean, not being able to get out of it safely? Like, what would happen the first time you fell?
Oh, just
I know there's a total
it's like a
random
bad
direction for
safety roll. It's like just tumbling down the transition when there is a very basic maneuver, especially when you're skating big ramps, where you just take one step to lessen the impact, and then you drop to your knees, and you have knee pads, and you just slide down on your knees, and you can do that you can literally do that from 20 feet up.
So like that was when you were 11 or 12.
Yeah.
And you told me just a half hour ago you went to the skate park down the street.
I did.
So what happens when you fall now? And again, I'm sorry that it's all about falling and the physics of this. I'm going to ask more important questions later.
I get up a little more slowly. But it's something that's just inherent with what I do. So I'm definitely used to falling. It's more like the unexpected falls, when you think you've got something and then all of a sudden something didn't go right, but you don't have the time to prepare for the fall. That's when you get hurt.
Do you ever think, oh my gosh, I just can't do this anymore? It hurts too much when I fall.
I thought
afraid also that moment will come.
I thought that in recent years I stopped skating the what they call the mega ramps, which are the ones you see, the big air events on TV. The ramp is 28 feet tall. That's the top of the ramp. And so everything you do is amplified in terms of your speed, your height. And so it's almost 2 to 3 times your usual height. And one wrong move on that, just one small adjustment the wrong way is tragic. And I just don't have the youth that I can survive those kind of falls. So I kind of quit doing that. I think that's the moment, like the last time I did about a 15-foot air on one of those things and fell doing it, it was like, I don't want to drop this far anymore. It's just not that fun.
So it's funny. So this is, you said a bunch of things that leads to a bunch of questions. Like you said, when you started out, it was all pools because they didn't have the ramps, because it wasn't really an institution like it is now to some extent. And the idea, and you see this in the movie Lords of Dogtown, where it kind of starts with the pools, it's very rebellious. There was a drought. The kids are going in the pool because they're all empty, and they start skating until they get chased out. So almost like the culture of this starts in rebellion. And did that appeal to you as well as the athleticism when you first started?
I like that it set me apart. I started when I was pretty young, so it wasn't like I was trying to rebel against everyone and get into punk rock. I was 10 years old, you know what I mean? It was like, I just really liked the feeling of it, and I liked the artistry of it. I liked that it was active and it was on my own terms, but there was definitely a creativity that I hadn't seen anywhere else, or that I hadn't really embraced on any other sport. And so I really enjoyed that aspect, and I liked that it set me apart from my peers. I thought it was cool. I thought it was like this different thing, even though they were like, "You still skateboard? You know, you should have grown out of it by now." I'm 11. Because everyone, like, skateboarding was cool for a hot minute, and then it just went away, and I didn't give it up. So I was considered the super nerd because I was still skating. I was still doing this kids activity, but I just loved it, and the sort of rebellious aspect of it. It just kind of came with the territory. You know, if you wanted to skate, especially in the late 80s, all the parks were closing. You had to just go skate the urban landscape or go sneak into backyard pools. And that's the only way you're going to have terrain. And so that came with it. And I wasn't trying to be a criminal, you know, I just wanted to skate.
So I kind of want to ask along three areas. Like, obviously, you won 12 world championships. You've won all sorts of contests. I want to ask about the path to excellence, no matter what your area or interest is. But then you kind of reinvented, or you did reinvent, into turning it from just a sport for yourself to this business empire. So the first thing is, let's say someone's not 11. Let's say someone's, I mean, I'm really actually jealous of that. I wish there was one thing I had been doing from 11 to 48. But let's say someone's like sitting in their cubicle and they're sick of their job and they are really passionate about something, but they don't even know the first step to achieve excellence at something. What do you think, based on your own experience, if you could dissect it, would be their first step or second step?
Well, I think it's definitely taking the risk of pursuing it, you know, regardless of the outcome. Just that you want to do this, and I do feel like if you chase your passion, I mean, I love what I do. I love skateboarding. I would do it for free any day. I get paid more money than I ever imagined to go ride my skateboard, which still seems absurd to me, but I love it. And so it's kind of like, in that sense, I feel like you're living the dream if you're doing what you love, because you would go wake up and do that for free. So if there is some monetary success to that, all the better. But you know, sometimes it's a struggle. If obviously you're trying to start a new business, and there's peaks and valleys, or sometimes it's just a struggle altogether. I think the best advice I have is, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir, but I think the best advice I have is that you want to learn every aspect of what you're getting into. That's what I learned by accident almost in skateboarding. Like, I started a skateboard business. I didn't ever want to know what point of purchase was, or net, or, you know, and then I just, but I didn't shy away from it. I embraced it because I wanted to be prepared for what was to come.
But even in just skateboarding, like, what was the role initially, like year one, of mentors, teachers? Like, what's, you know, let's say I want to learn X, let's say I want to learn painting or whatever. What's the role of like a teacher in learning? What's the role of, you know, how you practice and how you get feedback at it? Like, obviously with skateboarding, the great thing is you get instant feedback. You either fall or you don't, you know. And with you also, you had kind of those older kids who, you know, were teaching you every aspect. Like, what was every aspect of skateboarding that you had to learn? Well,
like, when I went through, you know, skateboarding has been through a lot of ups and downs. And so in the late 80s, early 90s, skating, in terms of the vertical realm, like the pool skating, the ramp skating, just came to a halt because all the skate parks closed due to liability issues and insurance. And so they were gone, and everyone just went out and skated the streets. That's how all the modern skateboarding today was born, was out of necessity. Going out and making the urban landscape your skate park, the handrails, the ledges. You know, I'm sure people think it was a nuisance back then, but that's all we had. And so I went out and learned that, you know, and it was hard to change my style like that. And it wasn't like I was trying to be relevant. I just wanted to keep skating, and I didn't have a choice. And that was the terrain. So that was like going way outside my comfort zone to learn a whole new technique of skating. But beyond that, learning to skate almost anything, you know, anything they throw at you. Because at some point, you choose to be a pro skater. You choose someone, or perhaps someone supports you in it, They say, you're pro now and we're going to pay you. They expect you to be a professional. You show up to a park or you show up to an exhibition and maybe the place is less than perfect. Maybe it's terrible. But you're a pro now. You're expected to perform. And you can't be a prima donna and be like, this place sucks, I'm not skating here. Where you might have done that when you were younger and with no sponsor.
Okay, but when you turned pro at the age of 14, the first paycheck was 85 cents, right? For selling a board?
Yeah, well, my first one was $4.85. My second one was 85 cents.
Okay, you took a step
So I
down.
got a spike in the, pre-sale.
So what at that point you must have had like either mentors or teachers or something. Like what was the advice they were giving you to become pro?
Yeah, it's funny. It was a totally different industry then. So the way I turned pro was I had reached the top of the amateur ranks and I'm filling out the entry form to the next event and there's a checkbox that says amateur and there's a checkbox that says pro. And so I checked the pro box. And then that was it. And I remember my coach, Stacy Peralta, who is, a legendary coach, looking over my shoulder and he said, okay.
So he clearly thought you were ready for something.
Yeah, I mean, he said it's up to you, and that was it. But now it's like there's the celebration, there's champagne, they surprise you with your own pro model, and it was like, well, now you're skating against the older guys. Good luck. So it was different, but the advice that he had, I mean, really, his advice was more. It was more about dealing with people and being communicative. I was this little scrawny, even though I was a pro skater, I was still like an outcast at school. I was super small for my age. Like I was 16, but I looked like I was 12 almost. And so I had to learn to come out of my shell and really talk to people and appreciate that, this kid came up to me with my own skateboard model and wanted an autograph. And I'm so self-conscious that I'm like, oh, I don't know, I feel weird. And then he just thinks I'm a dick. And so that kind of thing was what Stacy really helped me with.
So,
like, hey, you gotta. These are the guys. These kids are making it happen for you. You should talk to them.
I mean, it seems like that ties in later to transforming it. I mean, many athletes go pro and then go broke, and so obviously you went the other direction. So what do you?
I
think
went broke. I definitely went broke a couple times. Yeah.
When skateboarding was like getting outlawed or whatever, when essentially there was a drought in skateboarding, it was your passion for it that kept you through. But what kept you skating throughout that? Because it seemed like everybody else stopped.
I just loved it. I loved that I could do it. I had the luxury of still being recognizable in some ways that I could like. We're talking about the early 90s. I took out a second mortgage on my house to start a skate company, which seems like the most ridiculous idea because skating was going down. But I partnered up with another former pro skater, and we said, we've seen skateboarding come and go twice. It's bound to come back, and if we start a company now, it'll take the least capital to be on top of the skate industry. Like to get the back cover of the magazine the magazines were giving it away pretty much. And the companies that were big already were kind of giving up. So we positioned ourselves in a really good time. But in those days, I was doing, like my skate career was the extent of going to Six Flags and skating in the parking lot, like on a half pipe with rollerbladers for 3 times a day for $100 a day.
That was your job?
That was living the dream.
So
that was my job, yeah. And it seems like, it seems absurd now, but it was paying the rent and I got to skate and that's all that mattered to me.
And then, it's hard to have the sense that things are going to come back. Like, obviously in retrospect, it seems very prophetic that you could say, okay, this happened in the 70s and the 80s and it always came back.
Oh yeah, it was a big risk. And it came back later than we thought. So there were a couple times through those years, like 93, 94, where we thought maybe this isn't going to work. We might have to give up.
What would you have done? All you had done for 10 years prior was skateboarding every day.
I had gotten pretty good at doing video editing, and I actually had my own little system. And so I started freelancing for other skate companies. So I was literally making the skate videos of our competitors for a little cash.
And then, it seems like it would never have come back, or maybe this is not true, but what do you think? Would it have come back without the first version of the Extreme Games on ESPN?
I don't. Well, that's the definitely X Games helped raise the profile of skating. You know, X Games. The first one was the Extreme Games in 1995, and they were just throwing anything out there. It was like bungee jumping and eco challenge and sky surfing and stuff that I just don't associate with skateboarding at all. But through that test and through them kind of weeding out the random sports they're throwing in there, skateboarding always shined through. I feel like that was one of the highlights, and that's one of the events that the kids really enjoyed watching. And I think they really enjoyed, you know, they were jaded with pro athletes at the time. Like they seemed unreachable. They seemed like they weren't even people that you could talk to. And they saw us in those days killing ourselves, trying, you know, just for the sake of a trick or for a score, and being excited because we did well. There was, you know, for almost no money. And I feel like that shined through. You know, there was something very real and tangible about that. And kids, you know, it was the MTV generation, short attention span, instant action. And so that was like the perfect storm. That combined with our video game release 4 years later, I mean, that was like the perfect storm of awareness and of popularity.
Do you think, I also feel like skateboarding maybe had a little bit more of a subculture to it compared to like bungee jumping or something like that? Like,
I hope so.
Yeah, it seems like there was music, clothes.
For sure, yeah. Well, there was definitely a lifestyle associated with it, and there was an attitude, and there was a culture that was born out of, you know, punk rock, 70s, pool skating, clothes, surfing.
And so when did you decide, okay, I'm going to dominate every area of it? And
that was never
that wasn't your world.
That was not a conscious decision. No, this is what's going to happen.
Like what did start happening? Like when did you start to realize, oh yeah, this is now happening?
When our first video game got released, we worked on it for a few years. I was hugely proud of it, and I knew that the skateboarders would like it, but skateboarders just started calling it the game, and I knew we had a hit then, where it was like, did you play the game? Have you played the game? You know, that's what they would talk to each other. And I knew that was something, I think when I knew it was beyond anything I ever imagined, we released our fourth game, and the previous three titles were still in the top 10.
So how many total games have you sold with, you know, your company?
I don't know. I know. I mean, it was a billion in sales, but I don't really know the exact number of units.
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James.
Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
You can cross your fingers and all your toes during a data center migration. You can knock on wood, pluck a dozen four-leaf clovers, or look to your lucky stars for a successful office expansion. You could hold your breath, shut your eyes, and say all the well wishes to help avoid cyber attacks. But none of that truly helps you. Because Next Level Moments need the Next Level Network, with the security, reliability, and expertise to take your business further. AT&T Business, the network you can rely on.
So as you're learning to be essentially the world champion skateboarder, you learned all these techniques of excellence. What do you think kind of translated over when you started trying to get better at business?
I think it
I'm
was.
sure I'm sure you fell sometimes.
Oh
in
yeah,
business
for
as
sure.
well.
I think it was the idea of not being afraid to fall, of taking risks, and you know that adrenaline rush, even in business, or throwing money. Like, we did this tour, the Boom Boom Huck Jam, where it was skateboarding, motocross, and BMX in an arena setting, where I just designed this ramp setup, and no one was going to push the button to hit go on that thing. So I designed this crazy ramp setup, and it was like, well, we need to get someone to underwrite it. And like, no one's going to underwrite. You gotta go. And so I wrote a check for $1 million for the ramps.
And it worked out.
Yeah, that's the ramp that's at my office today. The same ramp. It is. Ask anyone. It's the best ramp in the world.
So what was like a bad decision?
Get what you pay for.
What was a bad decision that you made early on in the business?
Wow. Well, when we had Birdhouse was under the umbrella of Blitz Distribution, which my partner and I also started, and we really liked doing other startups. So we started other brands like Baker Skateboards, Hookups. Flip, which all are still around today. And he really wanted to do, he had a friend who was a designer and he wanted to do high-end denim. And it was right when, the cool washes were coming out and it was very boutique. And I followed his lead. I said, yeah, because the designs were cool and he was definitely ahead of his time. Little did we know that not everyone wanted to pay $200 for jeans. And that it was going to keep costing us money to produce. And basically, the jean company sucked away our profits for about 2 years. And we sold it for our debt. And so I learned that I'm not good at high-end denim.
Or it could have been, do you think it was maybe like off culture a little bit?
It was, a little off culture too. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely way outside of our expertise. But we were, we knew this guy was a good designer. We knew he knew what he was doing. We just didn't realize how much it would cost.
And then, this is related to, like, particularly around this mid-'90s time, you were starting to get criticized a little bit because you were the first skateboarder to really take sponsorships from everybody.
King of the sellout.
Yeah. So how did you, A, how did you make decisions in terms of what brands you would sponsor? And B, how did you deal with essentially the haters?
Well, so the haters, I've had a lot of criticism all through my career because firstly for my style. When I was a kid, like I said, I was a scrawny kid, so I didn't have the surfer style that everyone really liked at the time. I was like...
I have that style, but
That's why you're such a legend.
Yes, there you go.
So my style was all about tricks. And then I just got criticized, but, eventually sort of found my strengths and did really well in competition and kind of just shut everyone up in that way. So I was already used to that. So when it came around and I started getting big endorsements from non-skateboard companies, that was the first cry of sellout. And it was like, you guys, I'm in my 20s. I've already been through this cycle before. And I got to luckily it was the 80s and there wasn't any YouTube, but I got to make plenty of mistakes then. And I didn't hold on to my approval rights with products I was doing. So I was just signing my name to stuff and people were just making junk with my name on it. And so when it came back around to do these bigger endorsements, I held on to final approvals. And I had to fight for it. And through that, I feel like
who did you have to fight with for that?
Because
you had your own company at the time.
Well, like if I was promoting stuff, I mean, I did endorsements with Frito-Lay, McDonald's, Bagel Bites, all these different brands, and I had to fight for final approval over every single thing that had my image, which was a battle for sure. But I'm lucky I did, and so I feel like I kept my integrity through those years. And also at the same time, what I was trying to tell people is, I'm not. It's not like I'm suddenly deciding that I've lost my moral compass. If you had offered me a McDonald's sponsorship when I was 14, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. I love McDonald's. I still do. I don't care. That's the thing. It was more like the things that I really enjoyed and what I was into. Those were the things that I was willing to promote.
And then along this time, Activision comes along, or maybe other video game companies. And then how did you decide? That seemed like a huge opportunity. What happened? What happened next?
That was just intuitive. I had a couple of interests from other companies to do video game, and I saw what they wanted to create, and basically just kind of waited because I knew that there might be something better. And Activision called and said, "Hey, we're doing a skate video game. We heard you might be doing one, or you're looking around. Why don't you come see what we're working on?" And so I went to their office, and they had just done a video game with Bruce Willis called Apocalypse that I guess tanked. But the engine was the basis of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. So the first thing I ever saw was Bruce Willis with a gun strapped to his back on a skateboard, riding through a wasteland, doing kickflips. And when I was playing it, I knew immediately, I was like, this is it. This is how it should feel. This is intuitive. The controls were already kind of mapped out, but not the way that I would have wanted. But I just felt like, I was like, if I can lend my resources to this. This is the game.
So how many iterations back and forth before you finally had it to where the skateboarder in the video game was performing how you would perform?
About a year.
Mm-hmm.
About a year back and forth.
You didn't feel like, okay, it's good enough. You just wanted to. You felt the
No,
need
I
to-
dove in. I was living that video game. Like I was definitely. I was talking to them every day. They were sending me. Well, we were on a PS1 then, so they'd send me these burned discs of an update every week, and I would play it and give them feedback, and it was a blast. I mean, it was like, and then I had to teach Neversoft all about skating, so they would have like these company outings to the skate park, and the guys would break their ankles, and it was fun.
So it still seems at this point like the X Games were still ramping up, literally, and you were participating in them in every year. But then there's this one event that happened at the relatively advanced age of, I guess, 31 or 30 in 1999. You on your 12th try, you hit what's called the 900. Do you want to describe what that move was? Because it seems like that catapulted everything to another level.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that was another.
And was that a luck thing, would you say? I mean, not luck that you
No,
hit that
I
trick,
had
but
been trying 900s for about 10 years. I mean, literally, I tried my first one in 1989. I remember exactly where I was, in Bourges, France. And I couldn't really get myself to commit or spin fast enough, but I knew it might be possible one day.
Just to describe, what is it?
It's 2.5. It's basically 2.5 spins in the air. So you go up a ramp, forward, spin around like kind of 2.5 somersault, and then as you come back down, since you're coming down the same wall, you come down forward. So 720s had been done. I did my first 720 in 1985, and so that was sort of the natural progression of spinning would be 540, 720, 900, and there were only a handful of us that could even try it through the years. And so in the years, I'd say like 95 to 97, there was this race for the 900, and there were all these guys that were trying it, and we all got destroyed. Like we were just, I was breaking ribs and throwing my back out, and I'd go with a camera crew, and it wasn't like big production. It was just more like, hey, do you mind shooting photos today? Do you mind shooting video? Okay, let's do it.
But shooting a video of you breaking bones, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. I had the video of my first one. It was in 1995. The first one I ever really put down on the wall. I was leaning too far forward and just crashed into the bottom and broke my rib. So by 99, I'd kind of given up on it. I liked it. I liked that it was possible, but it was like I gave it everything when I would do it, and I just thought I'm not capable of doing this. And so when the best X Games had a best trick event that night, and my plan was to do a varial 720, which is basically a 720 with spinning your board an extra 180. So your board does 900, almost there. And I did that very early on in the event. And that was all I had planned, because that was my hardest trick at the time. That literally was my best trick. And so I just started spinning 900s more for the crowd. And the announcer actually kind of goaded me into it too. He's like, come on, let's do it. I was like, okay, here we go. This is what it looks like, And as I was spinning it, every spin was consistent. And that's usually not the case. Usually it's kind of 1 out of 3 or 4 that feel okay. And so I just said, wow, maybe I could try to really make it. And I knew from previous experience that if I shift my weight, if I land the way I think I'm going to land too far forward. So if I can shift my weight somehow during mid spin, I can even it out and land. And I started figuring that out
in the middle of
very
the
quickly
X
in the middle of
Games,
the
in
X
front of a
Games, yeah.
national.
Well, the
national
time had
audience.
expired by then. So by
But they
that
kept
time,
filming.
They kept filming, but I just thought like, okay, it's not going to count for this competition, but I still want to do it. And at that point, I was getting so close that I was like, okay, I'm either going to make it or they're going to take me out on a stretcher. That was the only 2 endings to that night. And then I made it.
And then after that, it was just like crazy. Like everybody.
It was. I mean, that became like a Sports Center highlight. And they had never, X Games was still like their bastard child for ESPN. Even then, it was, it was bigger, but they were still like, extreme, bro. It was all kind of silly. And then when that happened, it transcended skateboarding in terms of their recognition of it.
And so, and this is while you were building this multi-million-dollar, clothing.
No.
sponsorship video game.
So things were just starting to happen then, but it was. I mean, it was the most perfect timing. It was not intentional, but it was the most perfect time because our video game was released 2 months later.
And so, but it seems though it's what really is successful here is not any one thing, but the complete immersion across the board. So you're landing the best trick, putting out a video game, doing all the sponsorship stuff. So without all of it combined, probably wouldn't have, created the huge business that you were able to create. Or what's your take on that?
Yeah, I don't know if I would have become a business per se after that. I mean, that was after that in the video game. That's when I became Tony Hawk Inc., which seems super strange, but that's just how it had to be. And then I was able to. Well, that was a good out from competition. Was that year? So then I got to explore more opportunities, and because I had this awareness that transcended just the skate industry, I was able to open new doors and opportunities, and that's when we started the Boom Boom Huck Jam, the tour. I started doing much bigger endorsements, and I started the foundation. That was right around the same time.
And how do you think that same idea of immersion translates to many other areas, like let's say even other sports or other activities? Like everybody here is an entrepreneur, and what does total immersion mean? In like, what does the concept mean?
I think it's just living passionately and diving in headfirst into whatever you're doing. It's almost like you're so into it that you don't even realize it's being successful. I guess that's how I feel about it. When all those things were happening, it was amazing to me, but I just wanted to keep going and keep doing the next thing and learning new tricks. Even today, like I'm still trying to learn new tricks, but that's the drive. And so as long as you're still trying to challenge yourself and still trying to improve on whatever you're doing, you'll keep being successful at it.
So even though you're not doing the mega ramps anymore, are you still trying in some ways to improve every day? Yeah, because
I've kind of shifted my focus to much more technical skating, more low impact. And
like what does it mean? What's a technical skating?
Technical is just like doing really complicated tricks with the board, but not at great heights. So new ways to flip it, landing in grinds and combinations and things like that. I mean, so the stuff that I'm doing now, I'll make 1 out of 100 tries, maybe. But as long as I got on video, it's good.
Well, I saw a couple months ago you built this. You built from scratch. You had someone build it. This downward spiral ramp, which I had never seen before. And then they show the video of you going on it again and again, falling constantly, and then moving the mattresses down lower and lower because you would keep crashing into the mattresses until finally they removed them. Yeah. So how many tries did that take? And you were 47 years old. So
that's something that I've that's an example of keeping creative control. So that was an idea I had a long time ago because we do full loops, like Hot Wheels loop, right? And we actually incorporated that into our Huck Jam tour. And I thought, well, what if you turn that sideways so you actually try to stick on a vertical wall like that? And I brought it to my guy who runs our Ride channel and video production. He said, hey, we should ask Sony if they want to do something like that. And so we pitched it to Sony, and they said, yeah, we're in. Go for it. Here's the budget. Do it. And so it was totally our thing, but funded by Sony, which was amazing.
Do you always look for a partner like that when you're trying a new thing?
Yeah, I try to. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to pay for it.
I think that's a good lesson.
Yeah. And so they said, yeah. And it was funny, though, because we put the thing up, and I was fairly confident, but I didn't know if it was going to work. And they had all these Sony suits there watching, which was super strange. Like these corporate Sony dudes were just standing on the ramp like, well, when does this thing get going? When's the big event? And it's just me like slamming and cussing
and you were bleeding like in the video.
Yeah.
There was blood.
Yeah. I mean, I anticipated some falls for sure, but if you really watch it from start to finish, you can see that I keep getting further and further, figuring it out, and then it finally worked.
So, I have a final question, and then I'm sure everyone here has some questions. But many people might not know your son, Riley, is an incredible street skater, which is a different style than what you had mastered. And watching his videos are incredible. What was that? Like, what would you suggest? So I'm a father of a 17-year-old. What would you suggest as even advice, like
for someone who wants to kind of push their kid in a direction, or not push, but I don't know how to ask this. Like, obviously, this was a happy event that your kid was following in your footsteps. Did you push him in any way?
I didn't
or was
actually.
it a
Well,
natural thing?
I had a heart to heart with him when he was about 15 or 16 because he was riding motorcycles, he was surfing, he was snowboarding, and he was way more proficient at skating. And he kept talking about how he's going to try to get this motorcycle sponsor. And I mean, I know freestyle motocross. He wasn't that good at it, but he enjoyed it. But he kept talking about it, and we didn't really have the resources to get him, to the track and to enough, frequently enough that it was really going to benefit him. And he was also talking about like maybe a surf sponsor. And I said, Riley, I know like you're good at those things, but you're exceptional at skateboarding. You're already way better than most kids your age, and I know you like it's hard to go from beneath my shadow, but you do have your own style, you have your own direction, and you don't have to follow my footsteps necessarily, but you do have an opportunity here. And I think that was when he really started to focus on skating only.
And did you initially teach him some of the?
He just grew up around it. I mean, when he was young is when we started Birdhouse, when it was very lean times. And so if I got the opportunity to travel, he just came with me. So like when I'm talking about those Six Flags parking lot demos, he was over in the corner playing with his Power Rangers during my demos. That's not a joke.
All right, well, I'm gonna.
It's kind of sad because I couldn't afford childcare. So, but then he grew to love like that could have turned him away from it. Absolutely, just that he was forced. Not forced to do it, but it was just around him all the time. It was like that could have been. I'm sick of it, but he embraced it. He loved it.
Well, and again, there's this immersion aspect too. He saw every part of the culture of it as well.
Yeah,
even more than these other sports.
Yeah, I think so.
So I want to open it up to anybody to ask questions.
For more from James, check out the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network at jamesaltucher.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
So take 2 or 3 questions, of course, from the sports coach here extraordinary.
Tony, I'd love to hear, as you were like developing your businesses, who gave you some really strong business advice that would be, people that we wouldn't really recognize, or essentially people from maybe your industry as well, or sports, that kind of said, hey, I've had some experience in this as well, and maybe here's some things that you should be thinking about as you're kind of scaling up your own personal brand and some of these licensing deals that you've been doing, and how that advice ended up playing out with some of the businesses.
Well, I think that my sister helped me immensely. She used to be a singer. She was a singer for Righteous Brothers and for Michael Bolton, and so she really knew entertainment. And when she saw things ramping up for me, she just had twins, and she said, "Well, I'd love to help you because you're kind of moving into entertainment. Like that's what's happening here, even though you're still skating as much." And she was the one who fought for me to keep control of my brand. She's like, "You got to keep control of, because she saw the stupid stuff I did in the 80s. There was a story, I've told it, but I was working with this one company and they were making just terrible items, and they were like ripping off logos and putting my name on it, and they were making wallets and keychains. And I went to their office one day because I was sick of it, and I just wanted to say, hey, you can't do this. And they said, well, actually, yeah, we can. We signed your name. We have free reign to do whatever we want with it. And while he's talking, I'm behind him. I'm not kidding. There's a roll of toilet paper that says Tony Hawk Gear on it. And I was like, well, what is that? And he said, oh, well, one of the retailers said, you put toilet paper, you put his name on toilet paper and it would sell. And so we made that for them. And he's thinking isn't that funny? I'm like, this sucks. And I that day went and paid to get out of my contract. But I learned from that, but I also learned, like I said, from my sister. She said, you gotta keep creative control. We have to stand hard on that in the contracts. And it's weird being a person and a brand, but that was how I really kept control of the brand. And I tell that to business startups all the time. Don't let someone else take what you have created, because they're not gonna take in the direction that you think they are or that you want them to, unless you really just want to cash out.
Let me get Yannick. And your sister is your COO, isn't she?
Yeah.
And how long has she been your COO?
Since almost 20 years now.
Wow.
That's actually right in the same direction that I was going to ask you. So, working with family, pros, cons. What's been the best part about it? What's the worst part that you can actually mention, or what do you want to look out for? Because I work with family.
Well, it's hard to have when things aren't going well. You don't want to have the blame game, obviously. And I think we give each other enough space and respect each other in terms of what our strengths are. But definitely we butt heads, and that can be tricky because it's your family. But I think you just have to have a mutual respect for what you're doing, and not think that one of us is above the other in any time. And there are times when she's like, what do you when I first started doing social media, she just didn't really understand it, and then she saw how it blossomed, and then she started figuring out better ways to use it as well. But like I even today, I had a conversation with her. I got invited to go to Snapchat headquarters on behalf of Nixon, and I don't really know what that means, but I knew that it would probably get my Snapchat followers up, because they're going to probably promote me, on their main whatever page or on Snapchat. And so she's like, why do you don't owe that to Nixon, or this is a conversation we just had. Like, you don't owe that to Nixon, or Tilly's was part of it. And I said, yeah, but if I go there, then my Snapchat numbers will go up, and that'll raise my my value in terms of doing social media marketing. And that's been this really strange new venture is doing social media ads. And it's good money. It's crazy. And they trust me to do it in my own voice. So that's been a blast. Cool. But I need my Snapchat numbers up.
We got Cole over here.
Hey, Tony. I just don't have a question. I just want to say thank you. I watched you in the half pipe, and I wanted one so bad. I came to my parents, and they said if I want a half pipe, I had to pay for it. So I was probably, I don't know.
Get Sony to pay for it.
Well, so check this out. It was about Christmas time. I pulled mistletoe out of trees that was growing naturally and packaged them up and sold them door to door to save up enough money to pay for my first half pipe, which was the creation and the first thing I did entrepreneurially, which launched my career.
That's awesome.
So I just want to say thank you, because I'm one of millions of people you've done that for. So thank you.
Thank you. That is the coolest story about building a ramp I've ever heard.
We'll take two quick ones, and then I know Tony's hanging around just for a little bit longer after that. So,
yeah, my 10-year-old self is super excited to be talking to you. So that's great.
Thank you.
So I had posters of you and your peers up on my wall, and I'm curious as to what you think the difference is now looking back between you and those other guys that were up there, of how you were able to make the moves you did to establish the brand and make the decisions, and a lot of them did not fare so well or make the same decisions. What do you credit that to now looking back?
I think that, well, for me, early on, I never rested on my laurels. I always wanted to learn new tricks. So even though I was considered number one competitor or number one overall or whatnot, that wasn't the drive. The drive was to keep challenging myself, to keep getting better. And so I think that's where some of my peers as well, they got caught up in the celebrity party aspect. And it was almost like they reached this pinnacle, and it's like, well, that's it. There's nothing else. Or they lost their motivation. And I never lost my motivation, because my motivation was just about tricks. It was just super nerdy. But that is what helped me sort of make it through those formative years and those times when I could have got caught up in the party. And I knew that, I guess I knew early on that I couldn't get into that aspect of it, like the whole party scene, because it was going to affect my performance, and I was too proud of how I skated to be able to think that I want to do anything that would hinder that.
And we got our last one here with Kevin.
Hey, Tony, in all this mayhem, you're like the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
And
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Yeah, no doubt. So the Pappas brothers, they sort of make you the bad guy. I was just curious about your side of that story and what your relationship was with those guys and, some of the other old guys like Alva and those guys.
There's just so much that is left out of that, and it was very easy for them to make me this villain. What they didn't say about that was that what he's talking about, there's this documentary where basically this skater who got super strung out on drugs, and so did his brother, who killed his girlfriend and also killed himself. And it's just a really tragic story, and I never spoke up about it because he was basically saying that I sold the idea for the 900 from him, and I somehow banned him from the X Games. I had nothing to do with anyone competing in X Games, by the way. I was just a competitor. And so in his version of this story, I methodically watched him try this trick, which I didn't really watch him. I watched another guy who was trying it because another guy was way closer than him. But that I watched him try it. I figured out how to do it, and then I saved it for the X Games, and I got him banned, and then I did it, and my whole life and career was all planned out, including video games, including sponsorships. It was all a big master plan that I had at his expense. That's his story. And people that watch the documentary, they just believe it. They believe this, this guy who was a hardcore drug addict. And it's just unfortunate. Like, I just didn't want to talk about it because the whole story is so tragic that it's like, who cares about this stupid trick? Why would I want to fight this? You know what I mean? Why would I want to fight this whole story or try to vindicate myself when there's just too much other important aspects to it? So what they didn't say was Danny Way was the first one to try 900. He's where everyone got the idea because he really was the first one to really get close to it. There was a guy, there were about 5 of us chasing it at the time. I was the first one that thought of it because I did a 720 first. So that kind of seems to go without saying that if I did a 540, I learned a 720, what's next? I better wait for Tuss to figure that out. So anyway, it's so weird to be talking about this, but so there were other best trick events during that time. And Tuss would show up and just try 900s during the best trick events. I knew better than to try a trick I've never done before in a best trick event. So he never placed in the best trick events because he was just focused on this one trick that he couldn't make. And I believe that's why they didn't choose him for the X Games, because he had never placed. So he was not qualified to be in an event like that. But in his version of the story, that's the only best trick event that ever existed. And so that's, it's just such a bummer that the bummer for me is that is his reality, in his distorted view, and it's not the truth. And I wish he could accept the truth. But we've kind of made some amends through social media recently, and I've spoken my side of the story only because the media was just coming after me, and I was trying to be quiet, and finally I was like, okay, here it is. Here's what happened. But it's just it's weird, man. It's weird to watch. It's weird to watch a whole sort of string of lies about you presented in that way. I never thought that was something I'd have to deal with. So, does that answer it? Yeah, no. Did I go on too long?
I got a last quick.
Did I protest too much?
I got a last quick one about the hoverboard fiasco. I guess that was one of the
fiasco.
It was a little bit of a media thing. Were you aware that it wasn't, I guess, legit to some degree? I mean, there was your name.
Okay,
was tied
so there are different levels to this. You're speaking of the fake hoverboard video that other celebrities were involved with. Okay, I got asked to do that because it was Funny or Die that did it. Funny or Die called me and said, "Hey, we have the original setup from Back to the Future hoverboard, the stunt rig. Do you want to do something?" And Doc's going to do it. What's his name? Christopher Lloyd. I was like, "Yeah, Back to the Future stunt rig, Christopher Lloyd. I'm in." And it's for Funny or Die. So I'm thinking it's for a funny spoof video, right? They liked the way it turned out so much that they just presented it like it was real and then didn't say anything. And so everyone, eventually people figure out that it's fake and they're all pissed at me. And all the heat came down on me because I'm the only one who was really accessible in that video and through social media. So talk about a hate storm. Like people were really, really mad at me. Like, you lied to us. How could you lie to us? Like their dreams, like as if this was their only dream in life, was that a hoverboard was real. And I have shattered that completely. So I took it upon myself and I was like, I'm going to just say what happened. And I made this apology video. So that was that. And that was weird. And then just a few months later, this company called me and said, hey, we have a real hoverboard. I was like, I don't want to be the hoverboard guy. And they said, well, if you want to come ride it. And I was like, oh, well, we had just started our YouTube channel, Ride Channel, that was funded by Google. And I thought, well, that'd probably be a big boost for Ride Channel. Like, let's go up there and check it out. And so we went up to Los Gatos at Hendo and rode the real hoverboard, which is not anything like Back to the Future. It's super loud. It's impossible to control, but it hovers. And if you stand on it, it'll start spinning. So you can do 900.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.